Hello, fellow travelers, and yes, welcome to my own little hell of sorts. This is a travel vlog, but I am a horror girly at heart. I do have my main channel, Haunted Hippie, where I talk about horror movies. This is where I post my travel content, though, and also where I talk about physical media. It's kind of just like my hobby channel in general. It's really good to meet you. If you're new, click subscribe, the like button, the notification bell. That way you never miss the next video. If you're new here and you did not see my last travel vlog from Edinburgh, then I do have to preface, this is from a trip that I took back in 2021. So a lot has changed since I took this footage. I traveled up and down the UK with my partner at the time, and we have been split up for about 3 years now. That's why it took me so long to finally go through and edit all of this content, because it hurt. Well, it used to, not anymore. Now I can finally edit it. You get me. So I will be doing my best to give you all of the best traveling tips for Inverness. However, some of them might be just a little bit dated. I'm so happy to say that most of it isn't though, and I have such amazing sights to show you. If you're gearing up for a trip to Inverness, then let me just show you a little peek of what's in store. First, I want to welcome you just to the city of Inverness itself. Then I will tell you a little bit about what we did in the city, and then we will get on to the other Isle of Skye adventures. But let me stop yapping for a little bit and just show you the city. So that was Inverness. We got unbelievably lucky with the weather while we were up there, to be honest. I think that it only rained maybe 2 or 3 days that we were there, and we would have really good weather in the morning and in the evenings because you saw that amazing sunset. But sometimes just midday, like usually it'd be kind of later afternoon, it would pour rain for a little bit and then it would lighten up again. But usually we could get through our day's activities without really having much of a problem with the weather. We were there in late July of 2021, so I think that that kind of is like their peak summertime, if you will. The city of Inverness itself is not hard to get through in a single day. We did a walking tour for 2.5 hours that is unfortunately no longer available, it looks like, on Airbnb, but I'm so sure that there are other ones available because it is a very historic city, so I'm sure that you'll be able to find one no problem. As far as we could tell, mind you, we had just graduated college, super broke, so we were really just doing like all of the essentials on our trip. It didn't seem like to us there was too much to do do in the city itself. It's a very kind of sleepy town. There are a lot of locals. We didn't really see too many tourists, but also this is when there were a lot more COVID protocols in place, which I know I've said before, but I really preferred that time because I think that's how traveling should be. I hate how overbooked everything gets these days and just like how overcrowded everything is. But anyways, you can do the city of Inverness in a single day, I think. I think even our tour guide said that as well. Like he took us to some of the major sites of the city, just some really old like historic churches and stuff like that. But the best thing about Inverness, in my opinion, was honestly just we actually did go to a restaurant that was just kind of full of locals. Like we seemed to be the only tourists in there. It was just the atmosphere. Like it kind of felt like a place that was almost untouched by modern day vibes. We just really enjoyed the atmosphere of how quiet the city was and just walking around and enjoying all the luscious greenery. And there's a lot to explore. Like there's a decent sized little park with the river running through it. I didn't even really show much footage from the train ride in, but that also was just breathtaking. Like we knew once we were up on the northern end of Scotland that we would be in for some really beautiful scenery. And even the first day we got there, we were treated to this gorgeous sunset. And I know that I don't think that I put this in the montage, but there just wasn't room for all the gorgeous sights of this city in a single song. So anyway, the city itself is probably not one that you need to spend more than 3 or 4 days in, because you could do the city itself in like a half day's little walk around. But the reason why you go to Inverness is to see the Isle of Skye. And boy did we. We did 2 separate excursions up to the Isle of Skye, both extremely worth it. In this first one, yes, we did go to Loch Ness. We searched for Nessy herself. Yes. I hope that you enjoy. I will see you in just a minute. Ness. That was Loch Ness. We did learn some very interesting lore about the Loch Ness monster. If you're a believer, I don't want to dampen your spirits because there's always room for that belief, in my opinion. Like, even though I kind of got the down low on the real situation, part of me does absolutely still want to believe that Nessy is out there, okay? But what we learned was that the Loch Ness monster was likely actually a giant eel. There are certain eels that come into fresh water to lay their eggs, like to reproduce. And back in the day, these giant eels would regularly frequent Loch Ness. They even sometimes would slither up onto land to hunt, and they were huge. So obviously, if it's like the 1800s and you see a giant eel up on land, yeah, that's gonna look like a monster. That is a monster. They speculate though that because of changes in temperature, obviously like climate change, as devastating as that is, that's probably the reason why there haven't really been any such sightings of the Loch Ness monster in like the last 100 years or so, because it just is likely that also with like human population of Loch Ness and stuff, the eels are no longer coming into the loch to do their reproduction and such. Or they're just not coming up to the surface, you know, who knows? But I found that so fascinating because honestly, you know what? A giant eel is not much less terrifying than the concept of the Loch Ness monster. Now you might be curious why there was so much footage of this train, and your brain might be tickling, wondering where you recognize it from. This is actually the same train from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. That's where they got the footage for the flying car scene and stuff in the second movie. So I was obviously geeking out over that. We got to hike up and watch it cross the bridge. And on that train, you also get to see the location where they shot Dumbledore's tomb, like his gravesite. The info will be on screen. I don't remember the names of every single location that we went to, but the harbor that we went to was really nice. It's definitely one of those locations where like busloads of tourists will come in for an hour and then we all kind of like cycle out. But nonetheless, we got some nice like charcuterie there. We got to take in the ambiance of the live local music. And then continuing on with the journey, we also got to hike down to Falls of Foyers, which is one of the most beautiful waterfalls I've ever seen in my entire life. And yes, unfortunately, my shooting abilities were not quite as good as they are now. If I were to go now, I definitely would have shot in 4K and hopefully the footage would turn out a little bit more steady than it did. But I think this was kind of my first time ever really vlogging my travels, was that trip in 2021. So I was still learning, you know, whatever. And then ending the day at Loch Ness was just amazing. And that was a pretty tiring day. I do think that we took little naps here and there throughout the journey because it was 12 hours. And also for a good amount of it, our guide, who we really loved, would also be like speaking at you and like giving you history throughout the whole ride. I do think we got breaks to take little naps, but it's a little bit fuzzy now. Super worth it. Would totally recommend. That train ride was just phenomenal. That probably was my favorite day. But who is ready to explore the castles of the Isle of Skye and meet some Highland cows? I will let you enjoy it, and I will talk to you in a minute. was almost a perfect excursion. I really have no notes. The only thing that I'd maybe want to change is that we didn't actually get to go into the Eiling Castle. We got to see all these different views of it, and it was really gorgeous. We got to walk up to it. We walked around the entire castle. So that was super cool, but either it wasn't open or the specific tour that we went on did not allot the time for us to actually pay to go inside the castle. And I think it would have been like an extra £5 or £8 or something like that. I don't fully remember, but bottom line is we didn't actually get to go into any of the castles, which was kind of a bummer, but just being in their presence and being up in the Isle of Skye was kind of enough. We had such an amazing tour guide. We even took shots, I think, of whiskey when we were up in these gorgeous mountains. And like I said, we were so lucky with the weather. I don't know if just late July is the time to go up to Inverness, but at certain points there were almost no clouds in the sky, and our tour guide said that that was very, very rare. Now, I don't know if it's still rare now because obviously like things have continued to heat up. We still have record-breaking temperatures all over the planet, but we felt so lucky at the time because like he said that normally you don't get to see the tops of the mountains, and normally all the colors and the flowers and everything are not so vibrant, but oh man, was it just so amazing. Like all these videos really just don't do it justice. Again, the info is up on screen, but when we went, trust me, we could not afford $1,000 for a private group. I don't know if at that time they just weren't being quite as picky because of like the COVID protocols and stuff, and they just were like taking whoever would sign up, but we went with like just a bunch of strangers and we were able to book solo tickets for ourselves. I guess the only option is for private groups now, but if you're going with like your whole family, like you're taking kids or you're, you know, with a big group of friends, I believe that it is worth it. I do regret again that the footage that I got was not the best that it possibly could have been. I was taking footage on an iPhone, sometimes through like dirty-ish windows, so not totally my fault, but you're just gonna have to do it. You're gonna need to put Inverness and the Isle of Skye on your bucket list. I think it's somewhere that everyone should go before they die. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my entire life. It's right up there with like Costa Rica, the Alps, you know, the redwood forests of California, like Pacific Grove, Monterey. It really felt like there was magic there. I loved Inverness so much. So I hope that you enjoyed joining me on that little journey. If you're interested in Scotland, then I would also recommend checking out the video that I just put out on Edinburgh and also Glasgow. We did a little Glasgow excursion when we went to Edinburgh as well. And like I mentioned, I also do my horror content. I talk about physical media. If you're not interested in that, that's totally fine. But do stick around for more travel content. It's a big passion of mine and I post a lot of it. If you'd also like to follow me on social media, everything you need is listed down below. A huge shout out to the patrons. I also have a Patreon. There's a lot of bonus content over there and it mostly revolves around horror stuff. But this year I did post the uncensored version of my vlog to Amsterdam. So there was a lot of fun stuff in that one, as you could imagine. So consider supporting the Patreon if you want to keep seeing more content like this. They really do keep me afloat. The rest of my social media is linked down below. But more than anything, I hope that you enjoyed this video and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!